managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Of the Enterprise Security Weekly News. Again, you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW303 if you want to follow along as we go through them. Check out the links to the articles that we're covering. All right. So I kind of separated things out where part one of the news, we mostly covered market stuff. So security market, layoffs, new companies, that kind of thing. And the second part, we get a little bit more technical here. Get into some non-market related stuff, some trends. There's a lot of trends we've got here. There's a few essays, some interesting stuff to cover here. And since we kind of wrapped up talking about ChatGPT and AI, I guess it's appropriate that the first thing we cover here is Orca Security using ChatGPT in their product. And in more than just a token way, I think there's a lot of ways somebody could kind of have like a token use for ChatGPT here, but I believe they're using it to auto render the remediation guidance for issues that Orca Security finds, which Orca Security's cloud security tool, will tell you, hey, this is insecure configuration. And ChatGPT is telling you how to fix it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, it's just a Google search, right? I mean, in reality, you're treating ChatGPT, you're saying, hey, ChatGPT, tell me how to fix problem X. The only difference is you're giving it a natural language version of what problem X is. It's going out on the internet, pulling together, being smart about it, analyzing what's out there and saying, here's the best way to fix it. And, I've played quite a bit with ChatGPT recently to try to figure out how to automate and see if I could automate some of the projects that I'm doing on the side. And it doesn't always work perfect, but it's good enough. And I think, if there's an 80-90% hit rate here, I think companies could be in great shape just using this as kind of that first layer of analysis and response. I also see this being a good fit for first level SOC triage of problems. Ask ChatGPT how to do something. It's going to come back with a great answer for you.
Yeah, so absolutely. One of the biggest.
Go ahead,
sorry.
John.
One of the biggest issues with SOC is identifying what the SOP is. You get an event that goes to an alert. What do you do with that? And identifying, documenting, keeping that up to date. That's a big challenge. If this can fulfill that need, then that's great.
Yeah. So the one challenge I see here is if ChatGPT was only trained up through a certain time, what if the remediation guidance it gives you is out of date? Like, for example, one of the things we actually experimented with this a little bit back at my previous role. And one of the things I noticed is Google changed how things worked in Google Cloud. So the instructions you would give somebody to go change a setting in Google Cloud in 2021 might be different than the instructions you would give them in 2023. So I wonder if ChatGPT might be giving outdated guidance here in some cases.
And I think the short answer to that, Adrian, is maybe, just like anything else in cyber. But I think the way to correctly do this is to actually use OpenAI on the back end, and you're essentially creating your own front end to it, and you can teach the AI system over time. So let's just say that we use the 2021 base learning knowledge as the answer set. It's in beta mode. I believe Orca released this in beta mode, not full publicly released, but it's in a beta mode, in which case, I'm going to guess, I don't know this for sure, I haven't looked at the UI, but there's some kind of thumbs up, thumbs down approval to the fix. On the thumbs down ones, they have a human being going in and training the backend, OpenAI backend that they've created to say, no, here's the correct way to do it. And so you fix that last 20% gap over time, and it decreases over time.
Okay. I didn't realize that was an option, that you could further train it.
Yeah, you can't really further train Chat GPT as a front end because that's not, I mean, you kind of can, but that's not really what it's intended for. But Chat GPT is an overlay on top of OpenAI, which is the back end system that supports it. That's actually what Microsoft invested $10 billion into is OpenAI, which is the commercial version of that back end system.
Gotcha. Okay. Few new features here. Amazon S3 encrypts new objects by default. Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that encryption does for you. That's kind of like okay, I encrypted the hard drives of the servers in my data center. I mean that doesn't really. If somebody accesses that system as an authorized user, they're not going to see any encrypted data, right? So I'm not sure exactly what that buys you, but maybe there's some use cases where that buys you something.
So my
I think it can.
Go ahead. Go ahead, bud.
I was going to say one of the things that this buys you is you can check the box on vendor risk analysis or assessments when you're filling those out. That yes, we encrypt in transit or at rest. So if using S3 buckets for storage, for transferring data between customers and your company or within your company, and they're encrypted by default, then that allows you to check that box. Whereas before you can't. That's one obvious one that my brain jumped to right away.
Yeah, you know what this stops, Adrian? This stops the, oops, I created an S3 bucket out on the internet with no authentication authorization problem because the data in it is actually encrypted. You can't just dump a mirror image of it and steal it, right? It's actually encrypted. Now, if you have all the APIs and access to it and it's pulling data back in a decrypted fashion, that's a different problem. But many times the S3 buckets are sitting out there just for straight up farming, allowing you to farm data straight out of them. And you're muted. We're going to make that cat sound every time you do that, Adrian. We're going to go mew mew.
I'm glad I have you guys with me because I was just not understanding the use cases here. So
No
that's all that makes sense. Next new feature is an interesting one. If you've ever explored canarytokens.org or the Thinks Canary product, you know that they have there's some neat things that you can do with some of their tokens. They've got Slack API key tokens, AWS API key tokens, Word document tokens. And basically, if an attacker touches it or tries to use it, it sends off an alert. You get that alert. They now have a credit card token. They announced it at ShmooCon, I believe. Someone gave a talk at ShmooCon to announce this, and they've got a blog post with it here. Basically, you can leave fake credit card numbers lying around, and if somebody uses them in these places that you've hidden them, now you know that somebody untrustworthy has access to that location.
So
whether
I have
that be
a
your
question how
phone,
this
your
works.
laptop.
I have a question how this works, Adrian, because listen, it's easy to create number expiration in CVCs. Like that's a known algorithm for most credit card types, right? You can bang those out. We can create hundreds of those tomorrow. The question is, are they then creating a back-end system that actually detects the charge occurring as well?
They would have to be partnering with a processor or an issuer. They'd have to be. So I know there's privacy.com, I think it is, has a service where you can create. So this is what I originally thought they were doing. So you can even use, if you're a privacy.com customer, it's really easy to sign up. They basically create these essentially like gift card. You get these fake credit card numbers. You authorize it to use $20, and the most that can ever be stolen from it is $20. And the idea being these are throwaway credit card numbers that you can use in situations where you don't necessarily trust who you're giving access to this credit card number to. So they're virtual credit cards, I think is what they call them. So maybe they've teamed up with somebody. I don't understand exactly how they're doing it in the back end. I think I saw they mentioned that they're all Amexes. But I would expect that they all maybe have the same bin, which is something that you have to maybe worry about. If somebody sees that bin, and recognizes it. The bin being like the first part of the number that tells you what financial institution that it comes from. Could be a way to detect it, but if it's a valid bin, then you can't necessarily assume it's going to be one of these fake ones. But yeah, they've got to be partnering with some kind of processor that notifies them as soon as that transaction goes through.
So I have a couple other questions though. So most systems that I use credit cards for will take one credit card. There's certainly some that allow you to put in like multiple and allow you to have, cascading fallbacks and all that kind of stuff. But most of the SaaS systems are single credit card number, and you remove one and you put a new one in, right? Obviously, you can't put one in there because you can't be charged, right?
Right.
Unless it cascades through where it hits one, and then on the Thinkus side, you actually have it cascade through to your real charge.
Yeah, I don't think that's how it's intended to be used, though. I don't think the idea here is that you find out if Joe's Crab Shack gets breached, because you used that card number only with Joe's Crab Shack. So that's something you could actually use. The privacy.com, and other companies out there have this idea of virtual cards where you could maybe produce a virtual credit card for every vendor that you have. And you're going to get notified as soon as those charges go through. So you could actually do that with some real products today. I think this is more something you would use like any other honey token, where you're actually trying to detect somebody's gotten access to an S3 bucket or something like that. Like you could put this information on fake purchase orders or something like that, leave those documents laying around. Maybe the fake purchase order is also a PDF or a Microsoft Word doc canary token with the fake honey token credit card inside it. But what you're trying to do is catch attackers, not necessarily in a like a compromised retailer use case, just in a general, I want to know if somebody's hacked my company use case.
I'm looking at it from the wrong side of the coin. I was looking at it from the consumer user side of the coin, but in reality, if I own a database of 100,000 credit cards, I'll sprinkle 5,000 of these through it.
Yeah. No, it's a good example. Yeah. That's one of my favorite examples. Is if you want to know exactly when your database was compromised, this is something I've seen people do where they have fake customers in their databases, and they swap out those fake customers every week. So they not only know which database or whether the database was attacked if somebody leaks part of that database, but they know when it was attacked by when, which week that fake customer data was used as you rotate through your fake data.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem with credit cards, though, is how often do we see dumps out there on the dark web that have been sitting there for 6 months or a year, and you don't see any actual compromise until somebody goes through and starts burning through all of them. A dump could sit there for months at a time before it gets actually used.
Yeah, it's true. Yep. Definitely true. In fact, we've seen that in many cases where the time between the data being leaked and the data being stolen is years in some cases. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with credit card numbers, they have expiration dates, so that data is only good for so long.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the cost is low to throw a handful of these tokens into your database, and maybe the return is high.
That's exactly it. With the cost as low as free, why wouldn't you? Right? Exactly. Why wouldn't you do it? All right. Leonard Koopman left Graylog to work on Enzyme full time. For those that don't know, Enzyme is like a wireless intrusion prevention system. I guess is one way of putting it. Maybe not in the classic sense of a wireless intrusion prevention system, but it's an open source project that allows you to basically turn a Raspberry Pi into a wireless security system that will let you know if somebody's trying to use a Wi-Fi pineapple or other techniques to try and trick you into connecting to an evil access point, for to give one example. It looks like he's trying to turn it into a business.
Sounds pretty cool. I don't know much about Enzyme, but certainly understand Graylog, and it sounds like a great approach and direction.
Yeah, what I liked about that article is the excitement that he gets out of it. Right, when you read the article, he's talking about how excited he is to try something new, and you can see 10 years of building a business to 125 employees is a slog. That can be draining, and he's just ready for something new. So good for him. I'm excited to see him do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's. I've seen some attempts in the consumer market for this. I have a Thing box at home. I've bought many gadgets over the years that have tried to be some kind of like consumer security device that you actually put on your network at home that lets you know when bad stuff happens. And my Thing box actually does have some wireless defenses. It'll let you know if somebody's trying to spoof your home network nearby, for example. And it also gives you an inventory of all the devices on your network and does some cool things there. And it was $100. It comes in really handy. It's a neat device. It lets me know when a new device shows up on my network, and basically gives me a choice: allow it on the network, or basically de-auth the crap out of it. And well, it's not actually de-authing. It's using network means to not allow that device to talk in my network. Basically, ARP route poisoning. To knock it off the network. But yeah, neat device. I think maybe there's some space for consumer security devices out there, but I don't know if Koopman's looking to go the enterprise route or consumer route or both. But I guess we'll see. All right, let's see here. Security pros say third parties are increasingly the cause of cybersecurity incidents. I don't think you need security pros to say that. You just watch the news, and we've just seen a lot of those. So earlier today,
we saw that with the Target breach.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it goes all the way back to Fazio Mechanical was the name of the third party. And the funny thing about that is the reports I've seen, they're not 100% sure how the attackers got into Target, but they think it was through the vendor management system. They had an on-prem vendor management system that was exposed to the public internet, where basically the vendors would all fill out their questionnaires and do their annual vendor maintenance, that Target requires them to fill out and do for compliance. And they said they think it was a vulnerability in that system that actually got the attackers onto the Target network.
Yeah, I like your comment on this. You have a really cool comment on this. It says, "Makes sense. Hack once, pwn many." I've forever been talking about what I call the force multiplier of an attack. If you can, I've been talking about it for over a decade. If you can find a force multiplier on your attack, it's always more powerful. Even if we go back into the 80s and 90s with the Smurf attacks, right? We can send a single ping packet to a broadcast and take down an entire network. That's a force multiplier. So if you supply chain, and the reason why supply chain attacks are so risky and dangerous is if you pop one thing early in the supply chain, it cascades and distributes down to hundreds, thousands of target endpoints, and you get mass compromise, right? Those are the most effective attacks. Attack one, pwn many.
Yeah, in the Kaseya attack, we saw fourth parties and even fifth parties impacted by the Kaseya breach.
Yeah, we'll definitely see more of these, especially as we see managed service providers attacked and other vendors that have access, that are granted access, that are managing these systems. Because, again, like Tyler said, if you can go after one to then jump to others, that's a lot easier than trying to jump into each of those individually.
Yep. And somewhat related, ransomware revenue drops 40% in 2022. I thought that was it was really, I guess it's not surprising, like we talked about in our previous segment, the first segment we did where we were talking about breach responses. I think more and more companies are aware of ransomware as an issue and have worked out whether or not they're going to pay. And, I'm glad to see more people are deciding not to pay.
How do you track this?
So
how do you actually track it? I said, how do we track it? Do we send survey to all the attackers? How much money did you make this year? Did they pay taxes? Do we ask the IRS? Like, how do we figure it out?
It's on the blockchain. It's all on the blockchain.
Ah, that's true. I hadn't even thought about that. A big chunk of it
they're
is
probably
on the
monitoring the known attacker wallets that are part of the request.
Yeah, that's valid. Absolutely. I hadn't thought about that. I just was like, what are they doing? Asking how they paid their taxes this year? I mean, like
chain analysis. Yeah, basically go look at chain analysis. Yeah, because to get you to pay, they tell you what the wallet address is, and yeah, there are known wallet addresses for certain attack groups. Yeah. Yeah, the same thing that makes ransoming companies possible also makes it much easier for us to track what kind of profits they're making off it, which is kind of the first time in I think cybercrime that we've been able to see that kind of thing clearly. But yeah, it doesn't mean people are getting ransomed less, but it does mean that they're paying it less, which I still see as a positive trend.
Two interesting questions I have about this is the cost per record going down then potentially? That's one way of looking at it, right? What is the dollar per compromised record? The other thing I want to know too, and I wrote about this in the Cyberwide this week. Actually, Rick Holland wrote about it. North Korea and the amount of money North Korea is stealing to prop up. I'm sorry, China, North Korea. I can't remember which one. One of the two of them, I think it's North Korea, was stealing North Korea just did another 100 million last week. We can track all of that probably too, because it's all compromised of Bitcoin. We can actually say, quite literally, this amount of income went into North Korea or China to prop up their economy.
Yep. No, we absolutely can, and enough to the point to where I've and this really is not my area of expertise, but I've seen some articles where basically we know North Korea's income as a country because in what portion of it they depend on hacking cryptocurrency for, which is bizarre, weird world to live in, right? All right. Next one, I kind of had you in mind for this one, Sean. Did we decide it's pronounced Lars
or Lairs? I'm sure we're gonna get a message from Chris about that. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah. Have Mr. Nickerson come yell at us if we got that wrong. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lairs research highlights the top 5 penetration test findings from 2022. This is not surprising for me at all. I'll start with the number 4, which is WannaCry Eternal Blue, which has been around for several years now. That's, I guess, surprising, not surprising that's still available and active on the network. Yeah. I mean, not surprising. Number 1, brute forcing accounts with weak and guessable passwords. That's not surprising at all. To Tyler's point earlier, we need to figure out how to get rid of passwords. A little more complicated in enterprise environments. But moving forward, the technology is coming to us slowly, or at least the technology is available. Getting these systems incorporated and updated so that we can use passwordless is definitely where we need to head. Number 2, Kerberos sting. That doesn't surprise me at all. This is basically a method of capturing a Kerberos service ticket for a service count in Active Directory, taking that offline, and then effectively brute forcing it. Once you're able to open up that ticket, you're able to know what the password is for the service count that's associated with that environment because of how Kerberos works. It's a method that Tim Medine came up with years ago and has been pretty prevalent. It's one of those things that relates and ties to guidance that we've had for years, which is do not use weak passwords and make sure passwords do change over time for your service counts, or at least set them to something very long and complex. Like it used to be 20 characters. Now I think we're pushing to 30 characters for those plus. Otherwise, they can get brute force. They can get guessed. This is something that attackers are doing all the time. They're checking for Active Directory accounts with Kerberos service principal names, checking to see what the age of those passwords are, and if it's 3, 4, 5, or more years, those are going to be definite targets for them. It doesn't surprise me that that's one of the top 5 penetration test findings that the team over at Lars has. Excessive file system permissions, not surprising at all. File system permissions are often forgotten about, but they are a way to enable anyone on the network to then access that data and pull it down. It's pretty easy to scan through the environment to identify what file shares are available. There's something called distributed file system, or DFS, in most Active Directory environments, where you can get a list of what all those are and then scan through all the file shares within it. Those are typically not well secured. Authenticated user, domain user configuration, so that way people can access what they need to, but very seldom is it tightened up to the level of least permissive access, or the permission around the access of least permission. So that way the people that need it have it, but nobody else. And then finally, WMI lateral movement. So we've known about lateral movement for a long time. It's been used in just about every attack. Leveraging WMI as a method to do this is not uncommon. SMB is another method for lateral movement. Once you start locking down SMB, other methods are going to be evaluated and checked by attackers on the network. So, yeah, it's a shame to see that these are the common things. I mean, the first 2 brute forcing accounts with weak and guessable passwords, and then curve roasting, those are 2 things directly related to passwords, especially with privileged accounts. We've got to make sure those passwords get updated. Checking file system permissions, getting auditing on those, good thing to do, and patching these old systems, or at least figuring out how to isolate these old systems, WannaCry, Eternal Blue, getting them off the network or isolating them, and then finally limiting access to systems to ensure that only those that need WMI access or SMB or RDP are only available for those that absolutely need them.
I think a time traveler from 2010 or even earlier would be like, really? This is 2023? This is your list?
Right. Yeah. I mean, at Trimark, we track a lot of this internally as well, and it tracks pretty closely to what we've seen as the most common significant findings in Active Directory come down to old passwords on privileged Active Directory accounts, accounts that are likely curb roastable, service accounts that don't need to be in domain admins and other groups that are in there, Active Directory domain controllers configured with auditing that's suboptimal to ensure that you can detect malicious activity. It continues. It's the same thing that we saw last year as we saw the year before. History repeats itself. It's getting better a little bit at a time. We are seeing more environments with the principal service disabled on domain controller, so that's positive. But it took a few years to get to that point. So hopefully in a year or 2, we'll see less of these on that list. Hopefully.
With what disabled, did you say?
The principal service does not need to be enabled on domain controllers, and there's a number of attacks that can be done against that. So we're seeing that disabled more and more in environments. So that's positive.
Good. Always good to hear some positive trends. Right. Yeah, we're getting there. Somebody earlier today published a link to a GitHub where somebody had listed every single execution protection feature that had been introduced into Windows and when it was introduced, and it was an interesting list. Like it's not like Microsoft isn't working on the problem, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It just takes time.
All right. This next one kind of shocked me a bit. Like, this is Google's thing. Sponsored links in Google search results, more often than not, especially if you search for certain things like OBS, will get you infected with malware. I found this pretty shocking. I thought this was a solved problem a long time ago, but there's people basically saying don't ever click a sponsored link. This is Google's bread and butter. This is still over 90% of the revenue, right? Is just Google AdWords, is including sponsored links in search results, and you can't trust them. I was kind of shocked to see this.
Yeah, this is kind of crazy. I read through the thread, read through this a couple days ago, or whenever it popped up on Twitter, and I was shocked too. I mean, promoted link, download OBS, install it. Things didn't work the way it was expected, and then all of a sudden, the person lost their wallet. They lost their crypto wallet. They lost their NFTs that they had been capturing and collecting over time and paid for. Just everything. And the only way that they knew about it was people started asking them, "Hey, this doesn't look like you posting on the social media site, and it looks like you transferred away this NFT, and this other cryptocurrency is disappearing or leaving, or you're getting rid of it." Yeah, it's pretty scary to think that by clicking on a link and then running a file from that link that you think that you should trust, that Google had promoted for you, that you lose everything from the crypto space. The person in the thread said, "Yeah, I probably should have been more careful about where my wallets are and where I manage these things." But these things happen. I mean, even the best, most security conscious folks get tricked at times. I certainly almost clicked into a Zoom link before and put in credentials I shouldn't have. I got very close to it. But it is challenging at the best of times to make sure you get everything right and do everything right. It just shows that you need multiple layers to protect some of your digital assets, where we weren't really thinking about that so much 10 years ago.
And these sponsored links are everywhere. I mean, if you're
Yes.
a Gmail user, Google puts sponsored links in there that basically look like emails, into your email inbox. It's folks are going to be very vulnerable to this. So it's I hope Google has a plan to address this, because it's
and then AI, you can basically build these with AI chatbots. Like, build me a pitch for this in a sponsored link, and get that churned out. I mean, the capabilities of scammers now is going to go through the roof, because remember, it used to be the situation where you'd look for grammar issues, you'd look for spelling issues. Now they just need to ask ChatGPT or another AI to go, "Hey, help build this out for me." And then, I am the son of a prince in Africa, and I have $10 million that I need to give away. Write a convincing letter that I can send to someone to help me move that money.
Could it be? Is it time to switch your default search engine to Bing? I mean, it's got ChatGPT. It doesn't have malware links. Is today the day? Is it time?
Hard no. No way. There's no way I ever type into my browser Bing and say, "Oh, that's a smart move." It's never going to happen.
Maybe DuckDuckGo then.
That one I'll do. Bing, no way.
There's actually a bunch of new ones out there. There's U.com. There's Neva. Yeah. There's actually like a little mini revolution in search engines right now. There's a bunch of alternative ones out there that are startups, and all 100% basically saying, "Look, we're not going to make money off of advertising and messing with the search results." And,
yeah, absolutely.
I think
Christina on my team pointed me to U.com, and there's also a chat bot component of that. And so one of the first things I typed in was write me a haiku about giraffes. And because I have a kid that likes giraffes, and then another one about
first thing, because that's a logical first.
Absolutely, of course. And then the other one I did was then the next idea from an animal was a zebra. So I was like, write me a poem about zebras in the style of what was it? Shoot, I just forgot it. The person who wrote Dickens. So write me a poem about zebras in the style of Charles Dickens. And that was pretty amusing.
That's great. I've been meaning to explore some of those more. I do have a U.com account and a Neva account, and I've played around with them a little bit, but I need to experiment more with just making them by default, especially now that I apparently can't trust, like Google's results are still good. It's just when they insert the sponsored stuff. And I think a lot of these alternative search engines are actually using Google's results behind the scenes. I think they actually pay Google and use Google APIs to have good quality results rather than reinvent that wheel, but then layer their own value on top of that. All right. See, we got a good essay from Helen Patton here, Security FOMO, that's given me a lot of thought. I generally think, and I've seen some CISOs on LinkedIn basically saying, hey, I put aside a certain amount of time every week just to talk to security vendors every week. And I don't know, more and more, I think maybe security leaders shouldn't be talking to vendors quite that often. Like there's only so many vendors that you need. And from that point on, I think it's kind of a distraction. Like, yes, listen to our podcast so you can keep up with what's going on in the market and stuff like that. Like, I'm not saying it's not worth some time to keep up with what's going on in the market, but letting people brief you, multiple times a week, every week, just seems kind of like a distraction to me. So it's a good essay. It really gets you thinking about, and it's kind of written from the point of view of CISOs kind of overwhelmed, like always thinking they're behind, going to security conferences. Yeah, every time they think they've got things locked down, they find out about more risks and more ways that they can get hacked. So I think it's a good read.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one organization I worked at years ago, and they did a vendor bake-off every couple of years where they identified certain spaces, certain areas. They had vendors come in back to back over the course of a week and have the different vendors come in, pitch them on what they're doing. They'd talk through it. They'd kind of tabletop afterwards what vendors kind of make the short list, and then they'd work with them to figure out if that made sense for their environment. Nice little pulse check on where things were in the industry, and also to compare where things were. Maybe a vendor, the last time that they did it wasn't quite there from a technology standpoint or a maturity perspective, but then more recently maybe they are, and then bring them in to actually do a proof of concept, a POC, and see where that goes. Certainly going to conferences and looking at the vendor floor can be helpful in that regard, but it can be overwhelming for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and jump to our squirrel story and get things wrapped up here. And it seems like it's been an all Chat GPT day. So again, we're talking about Chat GPT here. The story is abstracts written by Chat GPT, full scientists. And, my thought here, and just earlier today, I saw that BuzzFeed is planning on having ChatGPT write articles and publish articles to BuzzFeed. And I imagine BuzzFeed, like everybody else, has done some layoffs. So, there's some, people are bound to feel a little resentful about that, about AI's taking our jobs. Like, I guess that's going to be an ongoing topic now. But now at the same time, I also saw somebody said they saw a posting for $250,000 to $300,000 for somebody to write AI prompts. And I know we've covered this in the past. There's a website you can go to where people just come up with prompts for Midjourney, for DALL-E, even for ChatGPT. We're actually coming up with the AI prompt can be complex enough that it's a recognized skill, and apparently you can make $300,000 a year writing ChatGPT and Midjourney prompts, and you can buy and sell them on promptbase.com. So, or maybe it's promptbase.ai. I don't remember.
I am all over that, Adrian. Sign me up tomorrow. I'm just going to sit around and type in, hey, can you create pictures of giraffes with Charles Dickens poems, please?
It's incredible how specific they get with some of these, though. I urge everybody just to check out PromptBase, just to get at least a high-level understanding of how specific you can get with it. You can basically almost replace a graphic designer with this if you know exactly what to ask for. It'll spit out icons for you, it's like a whole thing that somebody would take a couple hours to create in Canva. you can just write a prompt to have
Yeah,
that
because
generated.
the children's book we looked at in a previous episode worked out so well, right, Adrian?
Yeah.
How
Yeah, we
how
never
well
actually did that.
how well might this work if I use ChatGPT to create prompts to be sold in prompt base?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds doable. As long as the the data in ChatGPT is new enough for them to even know that these things exist to write prompts for, right? Like it can certainly write code. I've seen a lot of people have ChatGPT, like they've asked it, write me some code for, for a plugin for this, and it'll do it. But yeah, as long as it knows about it, I don't see any reason why you couldn't just automate the whole process, Tyler. You gonna cut me in, Tyler? You there?
I think he's trying to figure out how to prompt the AI to write prompts for him.
Maybe he said something too dangerous and the AI's cut him off.
Oh,
I don't
right.
know. He looked frozen.
You've
okay.
angered the AI.
Yeah. Well, that's we're about to wrap here anyway, but it would be nice if we can get Tyler back so we can wrap up here. But yeah, I mean, kind of my point in including the squirrel story is if professionals and experts can't tell ChatGPT from a human, what kind of potential problems are we going to run into as a result from that? Like already I've heard teachers say, look, like, if you can have an AI write something that clears a plagiarism checker, like people can just cheat. Students can just cheat endlessly. Like there's no way to know if an essay was written by a person or not. Right. You'd almost have to have them write it live or interview them or something like that. I'm just trying to think of what kind of problems this is going to cause now that you have something that can write stuff that is impossible to tell if it came from an AI or a human.
Yeah, the only thing I could think about on that was one of the writing assignments that I had to do back in school was I had to put together the outline. I had to show drafts. I had to show how I was progressing in the writing. So it might be a situation where someone has to show the versions, like show a first draft, this, that, and the other, and the evolution of the writing, which the writing style is also fairly unique to the person. So I think that I don't know that we're 100% there yet as far as if someone can just submit that and then get it back and get a full paper as far as something in the same writing style as what I would write versus what you would write, Adrian. But certainly the concerns that I've seen online from professors is like, yeah, the essay's dead now because the chatbots are so good at doing comparison, doing some analysis, answering the question in a way that would get an A or at least a B. Yeah, that makes it really, really challenging to be a teacher and assign essays, which are going to be a huge portion of the grade. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Tyler's never going to hire anybody to do content marketing again. He's just going to use ChatGPT because he's cheap. That's the point there. He's cheap. He's a very cheap guy. Won't get a haircut every 2 weeks. Goes every 4 weeks instead.
I haven't gotten a haircut since June, so there's that, but I'm growing it back out again.
I had to give him some crap there, especially since he dropped. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for joining me today, and big thanks to Tyler for being here as well. A bit outside the norm for our podcast this week, but we've got some great guests coming up next week. We've got, I forget who we've got, but we've got some really good guests coming up. I know Ross, who does the newsletter that we were talking about earlier, he's coming up soon as a guest. We've got some book authors who are dropping some books. It's going to be a new kind of guest that we get. We're going to do some book release interviews, and a lot of great stuff coming up to look forward to. So until then, thanks for everyone listening or watching to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. See you next week.